As the accusations pile up, Supervisor Dave Roberts is being circled by political opponents who sense blood in the water. The mayor says a vote on the funding plan for a new Charger stadium could be held as soon as December. But will it be? Seawalls protect homes but may destroy the beach. Can the Coastal Commission protect one over the other? The California Supreme Court will decide. I'm Mark Sauer, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are Scott Lewis, CEO of Voice of San Diego. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Mark.
Michael Smolens, politics editor for the San Diego Union Tribune. Good to see you, Michael.
Good to be here, Mark.
And KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson. Hi, Eric.
How are you, Mark?
Good. It was a punch and counterpunch in the political tempest involving County Supervisor Dave Roberts this week. Another complaint by a former staffer was followed by a lawsuit against his detractors. The county board's lone Democrat is being buffeted by political winds, so it's no surprise that Republicans are already eyeing his seat for 2016. Is he in real trouble, or is this a tempest here? First of all, Michael, kind of give us the lay of the land here. What are some of the allegations against him? Who's bringing them? And then we'll get to that lawsuit.
Well, he's in a world of political trouble. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Is he in a world of legal trouble? We'll find out. But, you know, as scandals tend to go in this town, things burst out and then they just keep cascading. It's hard to keep up with the events. As you mentioned, just this week we had two big events of another claim by a staffer and sort of a counter lawsuit, if you will. I mean, I was making notes just to collect my thoughts, and at the very end I said, oh yeah, and the district attorney's investigating. You can almost forget that. But basically what has happened is several staffers have left Dave Roberts' office, mostly women, and 3 of them have filed legal complaints with the county, which is a precursor to a lawsuit. They're claiming he created a hostile workplace, that he had an inappropriate relationship with his driver or another aide, and that he misused public resources for political purposes largely. One of the more damning ones is one of the complaints say that he attempted to bribe one of his aides to have that person lie to Human Resources, which was starting to ask questions about what was going on in the office, and the bribe was in the way of a promotion and salary. So those are kind of just the highlights. And then the weirdest twist, as you mentioned, the aide in which he's allegedly close with filed a lawsuit not against the county but against 2 of the former staffers, claiming they created a hostile workplace. Didn't sue the county, didn't sue Dave Roberts. So, like I said, you really need a score sheet to keep track of what's going on. Right,
and of course, as you mentioned, we know that the district attorney doesn't comment on criminal investigations,
right, yeah.
but you're tripping over them. Investigators are looking at Facebook pages and they're contacting some of these folks. So
yeah,
it's
they're
pretty clear
seeking
that
to interview folks, and they've taken some documents and things like that. We know that.
Okay,
yeah.
so all of this going on here, it's very difficult to keep up with it all. He's still not been accused or actually sued of anything in terms of in a court of law or in the civil side.
No, as I said, the law and the rules, when you deal with a public agency, you have to file a formal claim first, and I think it's a 45-day period, and then there's discussion about whether they can settle it. So you need to wait at least 45 days before you file a lawsuit. So the real question will be, what does the county do, and if they reject these claims, and therefore hundreds of millions of dollars now. I think that I tallied it up, it's close to $800,000 that the aides are seeking from the county in damages. And if they go to court, it's going to be a long haul.
All right. Now, Roberts has stood up for himself. He kind of made the rounds. I did want to...
by the way, he has said, he's just said, all this is false. I mean, he's flatly denied everything they've said.
Right. And let's hear that bite from him. He was on Evening Edition here at KPBS last week. Here's what he said.
I've been in office 2.5 years. My first 2 years under an experienced chief of staff, I had little turnover in the office and smooth operations. Glennis Vaughn was hired and officially became my chief of staff on January 7th of this year. And since then, I have had 8 staff, including herself, leave. 2 for personal reasons, 3 because they were part of her reorganization of the office. She wasn't satisfied with anybody in the office. And then 3 have recently resigned, 2 filing these claims against the County of San Diego.
All right, so that was, of course, his appearance here. He's made all the rounds. Has he been pretty effective so far, do you think, in his defense of himself?
No,
Scott?
But the aide in question, Harold Meza, hasn't been bad. I mean, he kind of threw a kill shot at the issue, saying that he's not gay, so how could he have a inappropriate relationship with the supervisor? And it's a pretty good argument, but who knows, how this actually plays out. But so there's a lot of contention. It's classic San Diego, like you said, scandal of a politician. And I think we should probably be hesitant to make any huge conclusions. It's still uncertain whether that big scandal that consumed Carl DeMaio's campaign, almost 2 years ago, whether that was, I guess it wasn't 2 years ago, but can't keep track of time these days. But there's some information coming out today in a few days that maybe that accuser wasn't so trustworthy, and so there's you got to keep a innocent until proven guilty, but he does have a political problem.
Well, and following on your point here, this latest complaint from Lindsay Masukawa, if I'm saying that right, she didn't really say, complain about Dave Roberts when she resigned. She said, "This is the greatest job in the world. I came into office every day, smile on my face, eagerness to assist the constituents, San Diego County, etc." So that would kind of tend to countermand what she's complaining about now.
Yeah, it is interesting because there's two sides to that. Because Roberts held up her, resignation letter. It was sort of glowing, glad to work here and so forth. This hasn't been bad. It's just these two bad apples at the time. So then she turns around and sues or files a claim, which totally undercuts that. She's claiming, I had to write it down because I've never heard of it before, constructive dismissal, which is in some way apparently a bad workplace. You're sort of being forced to resign without being fired.
You quit. It's a legal term for fired.
Exactly.
You quit, but you feel like you had no choice.
You were essentially fired, more or less. So, there's a lot of legal stuff. And Scott's absolutely right that we've been down this path in certain situations before. Here, you've got formal claims filed by people, attorneys, they're lawyered up. The DeMaio thing was a lot sketchier than this. But again, we'll just have to see what happens legally. The district attorney, I think, in the past has been very reluctant to weigh in on political investigations. But clearly, he's got a big political problem.
So where's the big damage for Roberts? Is it on the political side or is it on the legal side?
Well, right now it's political. We'll just have to see how the legal aspect works out. For all we know, that the county, which rejected severances from two of these women's severance requests under negotiations, they could settle and the legal stuff could go away. If they don't sue, that's that, and then we'll have to see what happens to the DA. But already the Republicans are lining up, and on their side they have a little more difficulty because there's a lot of people being mentioned and they want to get behind one candidate, as parties always do, but it's never quite that easy. So that's the big problem. Some people are wondering whether, is it's damaged him so bad that he'll even be able to run for re-election. Of course, that's what he's doing now. Are the Democrats going to start organizing if they just think he's fatally wounded politically and try to find a candidate themselves?
Well, so far the Democrats are supporting him, but as you say, the Republicans are circling Sam Abbott, colorful figure in Escondido, the mayor there. He's already come out and said he's going to run against him. And but the Democrats, Francine Busby, head of the county party, is backing Dave Roberts.
Oh, sure, and you have to at this stage because there's still a lot of smoke, and we'll see. Sometimes these scandals kind of die down pretty quick if there's not the legal aspect there. And as I said, it sort of depends on what transpires with the claims and how the women follow up if they sue and so forth.
But you have to remember, he barely won that race. It's not a given that was a Democratic-leaning district of all the county supervisor seats. That wasn't one of the givens that could flip for a Democrat. And so it's kind of a precarious hold. And so they just definitely sense blood in the water to really go after him. But, Councilman Mark Kersey's been mentioned, Sam Abbott, like you said. So it's going to be an interesting race. The presidential elections usually go in Democrats' favor, but again, this is a really split district.
And Brian Mainshine, the assemblyman and former councilman's one that a lot of people are looking at. I think the Republicans would like him to run thinking he can clear the field, but Sam Abbott is not going to step down. I mean, that's just not the character he is. But it is another Democratic year, and he did win in a Democratic presidential year, the big Obama win. Would he have won if it was an off presidential year election? Maybe not.
Who knows? Well, let's give the final word here. Political scientist Carl Luna weighed in on this. Let's hear what he had to say.
The Chargers are threatening to leave town. The economy is still not fully recovered. People are trying to pay their mortgages. On the scheme of things people worry about, I would put this down on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 2.5.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll leave him the final word, and I guess we'll see how important it is to everybody in town. It's fascinating political stuff right now. All right, more news this week on the effort to build a new stadium and keep the Chargers from bolting to L.A., as we just heard. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, Jan Goldsmith, the city attorney, and longtime county supervisor Ron Roberts announced a special election could be held in December to see if voters will approve hundreds of millions in public money to finance a new stadium. Here's the mayor's announcement this week.
San Diegans deserve a vote on a new stadium. And today we discussed a framework that allows for a vote this year. This means that San Diego would have voter approval of a new stadium before the NFL allows teams to seek relocation in January 2016. City Council can call a special election for the city of San Diego voters by December 15, 2015, if our negotiations are successful.
All right, sounds like the mayor wants a vote on this. What do you think?
No, he doesn't want it.
Scott doesn't think so.
They're not going to vote in December. I mean, they said basically they could. They're calling the NFL's bluff or bet, saying like, okay, if this deadline is really real, then we can meet it. If you're saying that at the end of the season that we're going to play out in the fall and in the winter, if you're saying you're going to move a team to LA, well, you're going to pull the rug out of us because we can have this vote before then. Now, I don't think there's any chance that they're going to vote because they don't want to. It costs money. But if they're basically saying we can pull it off. Now, the reason they could pull off something that says, do you want a stadium, yes or no? Or the more impactful you make it, the more meaningful you make the vote, the harder it's going to be for them to pull it off in time. So there's various things they could decide that might trigger environmental, legal avenues that they have to follow before they can put that on the ballot. There are various things that they might have to decide about financing that are going to take far longer than just a couple of months this summer to work out. And so we might get to vote if they do, push forward, but it's not going to mean anything. It might mean, the mayor said something about how, well, if we vote, that'll get rid of the possibility that they could throw this out with a referendum afterwards, as we've seen with minimum wage and other laws that have been passed. But the only way that would work is if there's an actual package of laws and financing and such that is approved officially in this vote. And there's no way they're going to get that done in time for that. So if it's just an advisory vote about, do you like stadiums or not, it's not going to have any impact, and it could be referended after that. So.
And what if they lost such a vote? If it's a straw poll and they lost, that would be pretty significant on that side. So a yes vote is what you're saying is not meaningful. A no vote could be.
Well, yeah, and a no vote, the mayor might actually appreciate that because then he can just say, hey, it's not my fault. It's, they chose not to. But in order for a vote like that to pass as well, you would have to have the Chargers not only say okay, but they'd have to be supporting. They have to dump money into it. They'd have to pay for the campaign. They'd have to create a big committee of people going around town talking about how great it was. That's not going to happen in 4 months. I mean, the best hope for San Diego to keep the Chargers is if the NFL backs off of that deadline and says, all right, maybe we can wait another year. It's been 20 years since we've had the NFL in LA. We can wait another year. You guys can put together a more thoughtful proposition and proposal.
Doesn't the NFL kind of have the veto power here? In other words, if they really want this team in particular, what we care about here, to go to LA, maybe with another team, or to stay in San Diego in the home city. I mean, isn't that push really significant behind the scenes here?
They're not going to make the Chargers stay unless there's a very clear route to a stadium here. And if I don't think the Chargers are leveraging for more money. I think they're leveraging for more clarity exactly how the money's going to come to pay for a new stadium, and that they can just go ahead and drop that race to LA. Because there is a race to the LA, and I think that they've committed that they're not going to lose that race without a fight. And so they're not going to drop that unless we've got a cashier's check here saying, we're going to build a stadium, all you got to do is sign off. Like, that's how much clarity they want, and there's no way we can get that much clarity in the next 4 months. Very hard to pull it off in the next year.
So how much of this is an economic question, economics for the Chargers, and how much of this is kind of that community we belong question. Are we talking about the same thing here or different things?
Well, think about the worst case scenario for the Chargers is that they get stuck here and somebody moves to L.A. and they don't have that leverage to say, hey, we might move to L.A.
That road is gone.
Right, yeah. And so then they're stuck here, and if they don't have a path to a stadium laid out, then they're going to feel like worried that they have another 10 years of this, dilly-dallying going on. And so I think that this is a risk question for them. They're not willing to pull back that LA push unless they get certainty about what's happening in San Diego. And so it is an economic question as well, because I think that they're looking at LA saying, like, that's $1 billion potentially.
Big market. You're going to be able to keep a slice of the San Diego market because you're right next door.
We can talk about civic pride all we want, but $1 billion is pretty attractive to anyone.
Yeah, so. That talks. Let me ask you a couple other things here. Talk about Jan Goldsmith's role in this whole stadium issue. The city attorney, you wouldn't think he'd be a likely big player leader in this.
I think Jan looked at this situation and said, "Boy, you know what this thing needs? This needs more Jan." And so he says, "I need to get involved." And so he negotiates these meetings and tells the mayor maybe this little task force he created wasn't something we should talk much about. He got it, helped him, as he'll say, he helped him get back into meeting together. He's a big figure here because the decisions that he makes about what route they take, about what kind of environmental laws they need to follow and what they can kind of push aside, well, that's going to have significant consequences to that certainty question, right? About whether somebody sues and holds up this whole thing longer than the Chargers are able to tolerate. And that's the discussion going on right now is the city, what it's saying about how fast it could pull this out, is that something that could be verified in a court when somebody inevitably challenges it?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, Michael, we touched on this a moment ago here. If you're going to have a public vote on this, and I don't know if there's been a poll, but it seems tepid support at best right now to keep the Chargers, maybe even...
Well, I think the polls that we've had and showed it would likely lose.
Yeah, lose in
public money
certainly not
at all.
2/3, even a simple
things
majority.
Can change.
But so what we're talking about is you need a big campaign. You need a bunch of folks out there. You need, Charger players and coming to events and all of that. Do we see that happen?
Well, of course not. Scott touched on that. Well, not touched on that. He laid it out that the Chargers aren't even on board. They're not happy at all with the way this is going, and I think are pointing to this and Jan Goldsmith's involvement and the disagreement between the mayor's office and Jan Goldsmith as to how negotiations are to be held. Say, these guys are supposed to be on the same table. They can't even get it together. And, they're constantly trying to show the NFL that they're doing all they can, but it's a dysfunctional situation down here. But one thing I think we have to keep sight of, and Scott hit on it, that, is everybody sort of angling, even the Chargers as well as the city, to push this back. I think that's what they would like. I know there are deadlines up in Carson on the land purchase, but that can all change. It all rests with Stan Kroenke. I mean, he's the guy that's driving this.
He's the owner of the St. Louis Rams.
He's the owner of the St. Louis Rams. He's going to build something, a stadium in Inglewood at Hollywood Park. And the question is, he's got the money. He could go in and start building, if not today, very soon. We have this notion that the owners are this star chamber that they get to rule. Are they trying to kind of get out in front of him and figure out how they deal with him? He doesn't say much, so we don't really know. But that's, I think, driving things as much if they can get him to hold off to get some clarity to this. But, if he's moving ahead on the timetable that he said, it is that roll of the dice for the Chargers. And do they have to try to leap to L.A. or what one final thing that's on the NFL.
Okay.
And the team thing. There's another aspect. They could have a team there and say, oh, we're going to have another team to try and string along the Chargers and the Raiders. Because once they lose L.A., they lose leverage in every city for a new stadium that they've been, basically holding them hostage for over the last decade.
All right, we are out of time on this, but we'll certainly be watching, and I'm sure everybody will be writing about it as we go forward. Well, California may not be falling into the sea, but some homes on coastal bluffs here might be. Homeowners in Encinitas have built seawalls to protect their homes against eroding sandstone cliffs, but the powerful Coastal Commission says the walls ultimately must go. Eric, let's start with the Coastal Commission. What's their objection to these walls?
Well, it's not that they object to the walls. What the Coastal Commission is saying basically is they want to have some power, they want to have some authority, they want to have some say in managing these walls. If you go along the beach up in Encinitas, you'll see that a lot of that beach is backed up with seawalls. Some have been there for very long periods of time, some are relatively new. And the Coastal Commission says, look, we know that this has an impact on the beach. We want to make sure that the public access to the beach is protected. We want to make sure that the beach is protected. And we know that seawalls play sort of a role in there, and so we want to manage them. And the big difference that was brought up in this case and is now in front of the Supreme Court is the fact that what the Coastal Commission was asking for recently was a time limit on these seawalls. Basically, you can build a seawall, you can rebuild a seawall that's been damaged, but in order to get that new permit, we're going to put a time limit on, a 20-year limit. There were a couple of families in Encinitas that objected, the Lynch and the Fricks, and they lost their seawall in 2010 during a storm. They wanted to replace it before the bluff that their house sits on erodes anymore. So they agreed to the Coastal Commission conditions. They have signed off on this 20-year time limit. And then they said, look, but we really don't like this whole idea. And they rebuilt their wall, and then they challenged it in court.
Well, let's hear from one of these homeowners there on this. This is Ellen Fales, what she thinks about the Commission's 20-year permit rule.
I don't believe that it's fair to ask people to give up their homes, maybe their only home. Some of these residents have lived here their entire lives. If they were to have an event and start to lose enough property that they would actually lose their home if they didn't mitigate it with a seawall, I feel that that's completely unreasonable.
All right, so she's talking to you about physically losing their homes, but also the value of these homes is at stake. If I only have a 20-year permit and I can't renew that seawall there, how much is my home worth all of a sudden? And these are expensive homes.
Well, I think you take a half a step back and you look at the reality of the situation. These homes are built on sandstone bluffs. Sandstone is about as porous a material as you can get next to a beach. You sneeze when you're walking on the beach, stuff comes off the cliff, right? It's not the best place. They have built the homes. They have put the seawalls up to protect those homes. And yes, their property values are at stake, but I don't think that's what the Coastal Commission is saying here. What the Coastal Commission is saying is we want to protect our ability to manage these seawalls. If they cause erosion, say you build a new seawall and it causes erosion 40 feet down from your property against somebody else's seawall, maybe your seawall needs to be adjusted. Maybe it needs to be rebuilt. The Coastal Commission wants the authority to do that. If the presence of those seawalls is causing the beaches to be eroded and the beach is going away and all you have cobblestones left, the Coastal Commission is saying, look, it's our job to make sure that we protect public access to the beach. And if there's no beach to protect, then we're not doing our job. So that's kind of where they fall.
And the Surfrider Foundation has a beef about all this too, and you talked with attorney Angela Howe of that foundation. Let's hear that bite.
This is such a controversial issue because it pits private property rights against the public's right to access the beach. So that's important to everyone. And I think what we need is more collaboration and looking at science and engineering reports about how to preserve the sandy beach for public access. And it also benefit the homeowners and coastal community economics, as you heard before, all around.
So the California Supreme Court takes this up. What's the specific issue now that they're going to hear?
The specific issue that they're going to hear is whether or not the California Coastal Commission has the ability to regulate these walls. That's what's being challenged. The lower court said the homeowners were right. That was appealed to an appeals court in California, and the appeals court said, no, the homeowners don't have the right. The Coastal Commission does. The state attorney general stepped in, asked the Supreme Court to kind of just deny that, let the appeal court ruling stand. They decided not to. They're going to take the issue up. It will set a precedent. What they decide will set a precedent that will affect any place where seawalls are important.
Yeah, because Encinitas is not the only place in California along the coast here. I mean, they got to be up and down the state. We got 900 plus miles of coastline. This is a big issue that they're going to decide. So in San Diego, do we have any sense of how many homeowners might be affected here beyond just that?
We're not talking about hundreds of homeowners. Okay. These, the people who are most threatened are the ones who have their homes on the bluffs. They're up there on the bluffs. They can see the ocean. These are typically not, how do we say it tonight? These people have means. Okay. You don't live next to the ocean with a view of the ocean if you don't have means. And they're doing what they can to protect their property rights, yes, but the Coastal Commission tries to balance that because its job, its mandate is to protect access to the beach.
And these seawalls aren't cheap, right? You speak of means. Some of them are quite elaborate.
They're elaborate. They're sophisticated. Another issue there in Encinitas, if you walk up and down the beach, you'll see it, is that a lot of people who have these seawalls at the bottom of the cliffs also have these elaborate wooden staircases that kind of go down the side of the mountain, and that's their private access. In this particular case, I think the Coastal Commission also asked the family to remove that staircase. They say it's a bit of an eyesore. It doesn't help public access at all, and that's part of the fight too. That bluff is kind of cluttered up with all these wooden staircases that allow people to have access to the beach.
Okay, a few seconds left. Access then is one of the critical issues here too, then.
And that's what will be decided. That's what the Supreme Court's going to decide if they retain the right of the Coastal Commission to issue these permits, to put limits on, to decide whether or not access is protected. That's one thing that will be decided.
All right, and we'll see what the timetable on that. They're going to decide that case.
They might decide by the end of the year. It might stretch into the first couple months of next year.
Very good. All right, we'll be looking for that decision, certainly. Well, that wraps up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Scott Lewis of Voice of San Diego, Michael Smolens of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Eric Anderson of KPBS News. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.